Okay, here's the rats, and this is from Jaak Panksepp's work. He was the first guy who figured out that rats giggle. And you might think, well, what kind of stupid thing is that to study? It's like $50,000 research grant for giggling rats, you know. So, but he discovered the play circuitry in mammals. That's a big deal, right? It's like discovering a whole new continent. There's a play circuit in mammals. It's built right in, so it's not socially constructed. There's a biological platform for that. And so what Panksepp would do with rats, he found out if you take a rat pup away from its mother, it dies. Even if you feed it, even if you keep it warm, it dies. Now you can stop it from dying by taking a pencil with an eraser on the end and massaging it, right? Because rats won't live without love. And the same thing happens to human babies. And we saw that in Romania when there was that catastrophe after Ceausescu in the orphanages, where the orphanages were full of unwanted babies because Ceausescu insisted that every Romanian woman was constantly pregnant. So the orphanages stacked up with unwanted babies, and lots of them didn't even have names. And they were warehoused. Warmth, shelter, food. Devastating. Lots of them died. Most of them died before the first year. And the ones that didn't die were permanently dysfunctional, because you have to be touched if you're a human being. It's not an option. You have to be played with. It's not an option. It's part of neurodevelopmental necessity. And you have to also play fair. So, because otherwise you produce a very disjointed child who isn't able to engage in the niceties of social interaction, which is continual play in some sense and reciprocity. So what Panksepp did with his rats, he noticed that male rats, juveniles, really like to wrestle. And they wrestle just like human beings wrestle. They pin each other, for crying out loud. It's like that rat has just lost. He's down for a 10 count, right? And so what you do is you take juvenile rats and you can find out that they want to play, because you can attach a spring to them and then they'll try to run, and you can measure how hard they're running by how hard they're pulling on the spring, and then you can estimate how motivated they are. And so you can find out that a nice, well-fed rat who doesn't have anything on his mind will still work hard to play to enter an arena where he's been allowed to play before. He'll work for that. So then you think, well, the rat's motivated. So the two rats go out there and they play, and so they're playing like dogs play, and everyone knows what that looks like. If you have any sense about dogs, they kind of go like this, and kids do that, and maybe you do that with your wife if you're going to play with her a little bit. my poor wife, man, when she had older siblings, and so she wasn't played with as much when she was little as she might have been. And I used to, like, if you take a pillow, and you go like this 3 times, right? That means, look out, a pillow is coming your way. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, whap! And she was completely dismayed at me. It's like, what do you do that for? And I thought, well, I eventually taught her that rule. The other thing I used to do... The other thing I used to do, is sometimes she'd come at me like this when we were playing around, and I'd grab her wrists and I'd knock her hands, her knuckles together, and she used to just get completely annoyed about that. And I thought, right? That's what you do. You just open your hands. Well, she didn't know that either, so she hadn't been played with enough when she was a little rat. And so, anyways, so you let the little rats go out there, right? And so let's imagine one of them is 10% bigger than the other. And so the 10% bigger rat wins, because 10% is enough in rat weight to ensure that you're going to be the pinner rather than the pinnee. Okay, so that's fine. So the big rat pins the little rat, and now the big rat is the authority rat. And so then the next time that the rats play, the little rat has to invite the big rat to play. So the big rat's out there being cool, and the little rat pops up and, does the whole will you play with me thing, and the big rat will deign to play with them. But if you pair them repeatedly, unless the big rat lets the little rat win 30% of the time, the little rat will not invite him to play. And Panksepp discovered that. It's like, I read that just blew me away. It's like, that is so amazing, because you see, well, first of there's an analogy to Piaget's ideas about the emergence of morality out of play in human beings, so that was very cool. But the notion that was built into rats at the level of wrestling was, and they're deeply social animals, right? They have to know how to get along with one another. And most of their authority disputes, dominance disputes, you don't want them to end in bloodshed and combat. Because, you know, if you're rat 1 and I'm rat 2 and we tear each other to shreds in a dominance dispute, rat 3 is just going to move in. It's really not a great strategy. And so it'd be better if we could settle our differences, you know, somewhat peacefully. And so, well, so rats, anyways, Panksepp figured out that rats play. And not only that they play fair, and they seem to enjoy it. He also figured out, this was really cool too, that if you give juvenile rats attention deficit disorder drugs, Ritalin, suppresses play. So that's worth thinking about. It's like, well, why do you have to give juvenile human beings amphetamines in school? Well, because they need to play. Well, they don't get to play. They don't get to wrestle around. I mean, that's oppression as far as I can tell. They don't get to wrestle around. That's fine. Feed them some amphetamines, man. That'll shut down the old play circuits. Well, here's the other problem, is Panksepp found out that if you don't let juvenile male rats play, their prefrontal cortexes don't develop properly. Surprise, surprise, you're not letting them mature. It's like, what else would you expect? So, you know, that's something to think about. Really hard, I would say. So, here's how it's tied in with the idea of sacrifice. Every time you learn something, especially painfully, which really means you learned it, there's a bunch of things that you already knew that you had to let go of because they're wrong. And so there's no learning without sacrifice. And now that means is that there's no learning without the retooling of structures that you've already been using. And that's because you actually have a complete map of the world, always. But it's low resolution. It's low resolution. And then if you go out there and into a particular area that you've only mapped in a low resolution way, you'll learn details that force you to update the low resolution representation. And sometimes that can mean abandoning whole pieces of it, because they're just wrong. You think this is like this. You think your girlfriend is like your mother. Well, you may find out that that's absolutely wrong, and the degree to which you use this low resolution map to map her, you're going to experience nothing but trouble. So in fact, in all likelihood, that's what you'll experience, because your girlfriend is not your mother. Or at least she shouldn't be. So when you go out and you encounter something new, it always means the demolition of parts of you that are still unformed and incomplete. And so there's a sacrificial element to exploration. And that's partly why people don't like to talk to people who have ideas that are different than theirs. Because you might think, well, sure, we differ, why can't we just talk? If you know things I don't, all the better. But no, if you know something I really don't know, it's going to challenge something I already presume. And if it really challenges, it will disintegrate, and I'll do a little trip into the underworld before I can restructure myself. And if you really challenge me, it might be an almost complete dissolution. So who wants that? Well, here's how you want that. The only circumstance under which you will want that is if you know that the alternative is worse. Continual small updates differentiate you and make you strong. You shy away from that, your map stays low resolution, and you make yourself weak because you're not practicing that process of letting go and transforming, and letting go and transforming, because you want to become a master at that. You don't want to be a master at guarding your territory, even though that's extraordinarily useful. You want to become a master of taking the walls apart and extending them and building them up, and taking the walls apart and extending them and building them up. And that, because you'll never run out of utility for that. And that can mean that unknown becomes something that's your friend instead of your enemy. And that would be a wonderful thing, because of course people respond to the unknown as if it's their terrible enemy. It's like, don't be so sure about that. What you know might be your enemy. What you don't yet know might be the best friend you have. And it's highly probable, because what do you know? And there's an infinite number of things you don't know. So you might as well make friends with them. And then you also start to understand that you are precisely the thing that can move into the unknown as if it's welcoming and grow and develop as a consequence. And that makes you a much different thing than the thing that has to be terrified of everything it doesn't understand. You're just in a permanent state of existential horror under those conditions. And you're dangerous to other people too, especially if they don't agree with you. There's another way of representing it. The dragon of chaos stands for the potential that surrounds us. Inside of that, there's the unknown that you actually come into contact with, right? That's the unknown as it actually manifests itself in your world as something you don't understand, instead of just the potential for that. Because we say, look, you know perfectly well that as you're sitting here, there's all sorts of things you don't know everywhere. But where are they? Well, they're not manifesting themselves at the moment. They're only in potential. But we could have a discussion that became argumentative. And then all of a sudden, it would be as if emissaries of that unknown had entered the space. And that's the unknown that's defined in relationship to what you know. That's what you actually experience, instead of it only being potential. It's a tough thing to get because they're both unknown, right? You think, well, how can there be two different categories of unknown? Well, latent and manifest, that's a good way of thinking about it. You know, in a relationship, it's going stably, but you know that sooner or later something will come up. Okay, up. From where? Why up? Well, from beneath. Well, what do you mean beneath? Well, it's from your complex. The person you're in a relationship with is complicated and complex. That's implicit in you. It's inside your conceptual structure. That's a way of looking at it. Now and then, when there's a disagreement, it will manifest itself, and you know that. You know that there's still trouble brewing ahead in a relationship, always. And that's part of what keeps them alive. There's an interesting piece of empirical work done on this a while back. So you might think, well, what does the optimal relationship look like in terms of positive and negative emotion? You might say, well, utopia, nothing but positive interactions. It's like, no. Imagine you get people to code the interactions they have with their partner during the day. You know, you sample it. You say, was that interaction positive or negative? And then what you're trying to do is predict the longevity of the relationship. Okay, so here's the data. If it falls under 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction, the relationship doesn't continue. Fair enough, too much negative. That's easy to understand. If it exceeds 11 positive to 1 negative, the relationship doesn't last. Why? No challenge. Right? What do you want from your partner? Bliss? No. No, you don't. You want periods of peace punctuated by a good fight. And because that means you respect them, it means you have something to offer each other, and it means that you're both growing. And so you don't want the fight to be too dramatic because, well, then you retreat, you can't settle it. But the person that you can completely map and who only does positive things for you, it's like, A, you don't know that person. B, they're not communicating with you, nor you with them. Maybe they're just subordinating themselves to you or you to them. And you're not growing. You want someone who can, a real relationship is a wrestling match. It's a grappling phenomena that you both emerge transformed from. And that's what people want. They don't want a pushover. Not unless there's something wrong with them. You know, a narcissistic person who never wants to be challenged will want a partner who does nothing but deliver exactly what they're told to deliver, but they will mistreat them beyond belief, and perhaps deservedly so. Because a corporation is a body, in some sense, that has a tremendous amount of built-in value. And what can happen as the corporation develops is it gets full of people who just pull out the value. They don't actually do anything. They rape the brand is what they do. Because the brand has value, you know, like the Disney brand has value because it's associated with quality. You know, and if you wanted to destroy that, you take over the company and you put out Snow White 2 and Snow White 3 and Snow White 5 and Snow White 12 and everybody would buy it until like Snow White 20 when they wouldn't trust you anymore, and then you've sucked all the value out of the company and it's dead. You know, or you get people who come into the corporation and all they want to do is maneuver up to the top. They don't give a damn about what the thing is supposed to be producing, or about how they're structuring their relationships with other people, or about anything that has to do with the truth. They use language instrumentally to reach their goals. And you get enough people like that in your company, and it's like, it's dead. It's gone. And that happens to companies all the time, because they don't last, right? This is why Marx was wrong. You know, he said, power and money accumulate in the hands of fewer and fewer people. What he didn't say is it's always different people. You know, it's like there's a 1%, but it's not the same people. You know, most family fortunes don't last 3 generations, and neither do most large companies. So there's a lot of dynamic turnover. But you know, you guys are going to be working in companies, a lot of you, at at least at some point, at pretty damn significant levels. And even at an entry level, you have more power than you think. You know, it is not necessary to do things you know are stupid and meaningless. And if the situation that you're in is demanding that, then you might ask yourself, maybe I should be somewhere else. And then you might say, well, I can't be. And what I would say to that is, prepare yourself to be. Like if you're going to go into a company and you want to live ethically, you need an escape strategy. And you need to have that along with you all the time. So you need an updated resume, and you need to be keeping your damn eye on the job market so that you can see where the other opportunities lie for you, and so you're not afraid to pursue them. You know, so you got to hone your interview skills. You got to keep your damn resume polished up. You got to make sure you have a broad social network, and you have to do it consciously. And so that if some dingbat tells you to do something counterproductive, meaningless, and we'll push it one step farther, clearly unethical, you can say no. And you can mean it, because no means I'm not doing that. And if you push me, we'll either have a war or I'll go somewhere else. It's like, that's what no means. That's what it means. It means I'm not doing this. And you can't say no till you have an alternative, right? You have to set yourself up so that no doesn't kill you, because obviously then you won't say it. These are important things to consider, because the actions that you take at the level of your individual career are going to have far more impact on the ethics and the productivity of the place that you work than you can imagine, especially if you're someone who's straight and sees what's right in front of their face, because those are the people that keep the damn companies running, and there's not necessarily that many of them. You know, the Price's Law rule is that square root of the number of people who are doing a job do half the work. So you could say that in a company of 1,000 people, 30 people are doing half the work. You know, and you could be one of them. And then if you are one of them, you can bloody well say no, because they actually need you. And so your loss can be a catastrophe. And that's what you want to aim for. It's like you want to be the person whose loss would be a catastrophe, because then you've got some power. And then you can bargain. And then you don't have to do stupid, useless, crooked things. And you'll have a much better life if you don't have to do those things. So, it's very, very practical advice. So.
Is now a good time to ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. When you were talking about how, like, divorce and, like, if you have a family and you have, like, a divorce battle, how people, like, sometimes never come out of that. And I remember you saying that in a class before, too. So, what do you think about that is so, like, horrible, and what allows people to come out of that?
Okay, well, let's think about this for a minute. Okay. And then we'll go back to the symbolic stuff again. How many chances do you think you'll have in your life for like a serious, high-quality, intimate relationship? What do you guys think? How many chances are you going to have for that?
3 to 4.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I would say you probably top out at about 5. Okay.
2 down, 3 to go.
So, okay, so, you know, that's not that many chances. Plus, you get old quick. You know, by the time you're 45, you're not going to have a family. And, well, you can do that sometimes if you're male. If you're female, maybe, but it gets pretty rough. And you're looking probably at that point at a fair bit of in vitro and that sort of interaction. It's tough, it's hard on people. So, you know, not only do you not have that many chances, you don't have that much time. So you got to get it right. So if you get it wrong, it costs you. Like maybe it'll cost you 5 years. 5 years is a long time. So, and 3 5-year costs is like, you've lost things there that you can't replace. Okay, so that's one part of it is, you don't have that many chances, and it's costly to burn up the time. Okay, the second thing is, a divorce is very complicated. Like, it's not so bad if you get divorced to someone who's reasonable. But often the reason that you're getting divorced is that one or the other or both of you aren't that reasonable. And what that might mean is that you might be negotiating with someone whose basic goal is to make sure that you don't have another day of success in the next 20 years. And if that's their goal, they will attain it. So, and there's lots of ways people do that, and they usually do it by holding their children hostage. And people will definitely do that. They do it all the time, you know. So, you want to avoid that. And then, you know, then of course it's hard on the relationship you have with your children. And like those are probably the most important relationships you have in your life. You know, it's like, might be parents, might be siblings, might be your partner, might be your kids. But I think when it comes right down to it, your parents are old, and so are you, but your kids aren't. And they're just as close. Plus they need you. And so you start twisting and messing that about, boy, it's hard on your psyche. It's hard on the kids too. So, you know.
So then I'm just thinking about that and what you said about how that's a cost. If you mess it up, and that's like a 5-year cost, that's it costs you, right?
Oh, and it might be a 15-year cost if you're in a custody battle, and it'll
Yeah.
cost you $250,000.
Right.
Or
let's
more.
say, yeah, but like, is it then, would you say, like being a psychologist, that it's better for people to like pursue a relationship that's like not good, to continue to do that and possibly incur further costs than it is to just cut it off? Because it would divorce be.
Okay, it's a complicated question. What I would say is, don't make the kind of mistakes that get you into such a stupid relationship to begin with. Okay, because that's the answer to that question. And the way you do that is by trying not to delude yourself any more than is absolutely necessary. And that means, when you're in the damn relationship, tell the person the truth. And try to figure out what the truth is for you. And don't put up with any nonsense. And stand up for yourself. And also, aim towards the good. You know, if you do all those things, then your relationship is probably going to work. If you're trying to do all those things, really, and you have a partner that will not do that, then leave. But it's a rare person who won't do that if they're stepped along the way properly and they learn how to do it. Now, not everyone's like that, because you do run into some people who are basically devoted towards mayhem and trouble. You know, but usually, you know, a person is a balance of striving for the good and, you know, messing about in the hell. And, you know, you're both like that when you start a relationship, and you try to tilt it towards the good. And then you won't run into that problem. So, but you have to do that right from the beginning of the relationship, you know. Because it doesn't take that much to corrupt a relationship so that it's not really salvageable. Enough mistakes, 3 or 4 acts of infidelity, you're done. You aren't going to come back from that, because the fundamental element of trust has been removed. And then you can't communicate with the person because you don't know if they're telling you the truth, and then you don't know if you're dealing with reality. And if you're not dealing with reality with your partner, it's like, good luck fixing that. It's like you're working on a ghost car while the real one is sitting in the shop with the motor out, you know. It's not going to get you anywhere. So a lot of the issue is, don't get in the trouble to begin with. If you are in the trouble, well, then you try to straighten yourself out and see if you can fix it. Well, if you can't, your options aren't great. And it depends on the particularities of the situation. Now, no, I have people that I counsel, it's like, leave that person. And the rule is, they're lying to you, they aren't aiming up, and you won't be able to tolerate being with them for 10 years without becoming resentful, alcoholic, and homicidal. So that's a bad outcome. There's nothing you can do to avoid it, so you might as well leave. But, you know, you have to have that sorted out. It has to be the truth, because it's no fun. It's no good to leave someone who's struggling in the lurch, you know, and you think, well, I'm with this person, they're not going anywhere, you know, maybe they have an alcohol problem, and they're resentful. It's like, but I'm all they've got. Well, they bloody well better want to fix that, because you're not going to be able to fix it. All that'll happen is you'll end up in the same place. Now, if they really want to fix it, more than anything, and they're willing to tell the truth about it, and willing to interact with you, then there's a ghost of a chance you might pull through it. But it's very hard to fix someone, and it's really hard to fix someone who does not want to be fixed. And there's lots of people like that. So